On today's episode of An Echo of Glory, we talk to Serie A expert Patrick Kendrick on our potential new keeper, to Jon Mackenzie on the tactics that Postecoglou will employ, and that breaking Kane and Madison transfer news.
And if you like what you're watching, or even if you don't, like, comment and subscribe, and don't forget to tell your mates as well.
Welcome to An Echo of Glory. Joining me once again is Gary Diamond. Afternoon. And back in the starting lineup, Jake Robson. Hello, Jake.
I thought I was done there for a sec.
Listen, you've been in Italy, and then we're signing an Italian goalkeeper. Is that something to do with you? You involved?
I can't say.
Okay. We're going to come back to him, the guy whose name I can't pronounce, Vicario. We'll come back to him. But we come on air with a little bit of kind of breaking news, but it's more rumour, but strong rumour. Two things. Harry Kane, a bid from Bayern Munich. Well, let's start with that. A potential bid from Bayern Munich. How do we feel, Gary?
I don't see it. I just don't see it.
You don't see that Bayern have made a bid, or that we would sell him to Bayern Munich?
Either or. I just Bayern may well make a bid. I can't see why Harry Kane would go to Bayern Munich, and at the levels of money that are being mooted, I can't see that Spurs.
Yeah,
would
so
accept
70 million plus add-ons.
Yeah, I can't see that we would accept anything less than £100 million as a minimum, and I just can't get past the fact of why would. I don't think Harry Kane would want to leave the Premier League when he's got Shearer's record in sight. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we try and steer clear of all that rumour and conjecture on here, but bid or not, how do you see Kane being someone who's going to end up at Bayern Munich? I personally think he might end up there one day. I don't see him ending up there this season.
I've never thought he would ever leave Tottenham to go abroad. And I think it even I thought it was maybe possible 4 or 5 years ago if that was ever going to happen.
You don't think if he breaks the record?
Yes, so now I was going to say,
right.
If he breaks the record, now that the record's in sight, nobody seems to mention the fact that
no, because trophies are everything apparently.
Yeah,
and I don't know if they
he
are
might
to
go
him.
to Bayern and he might win the Bundesliga, and he might win their FA Cup. But I mean, with Shearer's record, he's so close to it now. There's no way he's leaving England until he's got that under wraps. Now, I'm not going to say that he's definitely going to stay at Tottenham. Yeah. But I just can't see him going, because he also has to want to go. People say, "Oh, but Bayern have made a bid. You know, Tottenham won't accept this." But what if he doesn't want to leave anyway?
There is two things that concern me. Is that the links to Bayern have been going on for some time. It's very clear to me that Bayern absolutely do want Harry Kane. I don't know what their situation is at the moment in Germany as to whether they need some positive press or whatever.
They need a new striker. They got that bloke who played for Stoke, Choupo-Moting, playing up front.
Fine. So you know, they could well need to be seen by their fans to be ambitious and what have you. But and the other thing that does concern me slightly is I think it's unusual for a club to submit a bid to another club if they haven't received positive indication from the player or representatives that the player would be open to it. So I can't say
worrying, isn't it?
I can't say I'm not concerned.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't understand it from Tottenham's point of view.
Maybe
On the money that's being discussed, I couldn't understand it currently. If it gets to 100 million plus, I could start to understand it from Spurs' point of view, but I will never be able to understand it from Harry Kane's point of view as to why Bayern Munich to him would be an attractive proposition.
Trophies are the only reason.
I'll tell you, they do need some positive press because they sold Robert Lewandowski. They then brought in Sadio Mane, who was meant to be the sort of heir apparent, the big signing, that kind of thing. Hasn't really worked out after one season. He's had issues with getting on with other players. They do need some positive press. The fans do want to hear that they're going to be signing effectively the next Lewandowski. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if that has something to do with it because, as you said, the fee. I mean, it's
it's not close, is it?
It's not.
Even with a year left, I couldn't care less. He's probably the best centre forward in the world, so I'm not interested. It's not my choice.
Not for me, Clive.
Another bit of strong rumour: James Maddison. I think a player that we probably should have signed 5 years ago, but we didn't. And someone I think that we should go and get. Sounds like we will go and get. That's a positive.
We'll try and
get. I think the rumours are starting to grow that it's going to happen. A player we've been kind of crying out for.
Yeah, I think James. We've said for a long time that Madison's a player that has been linked with Tottenham. There were rumours that Conte rejected the transfer last summer.
Yeah. He was too good on the ball to Be interesting to contact.
Wanted the ball.
Oh yeah. Sorry, wanted the ball. Yeah.
But look, it looks very likely that we are going to get him now. I think he is the ideal sort of profile from the way that we understand that Postecoglou sets up. I don't think it's without its concerns. Maddison is a player who, to me, is hugely talented, a lot of ability. I wonder how he will stand out in the bigger pond, which Tottenham is, and there is also the concern about his injury record. I don't think Madison is the wonderful player. I mean, he's a very, very good player. I don't think he's as highly rated as he's made out to be, but he is a very good fit for Tottenham at this moment.
Jake, agree?
No, I think he would be. I think he's a great player for his age. I think he has been the best player at Leicester for the last couple of seasons. I think he's arguably made, almost carried Leicester at times. I think on the ball he's fantastic. He picks a pass. Obviously his free kicks are amazing. I think he's a really sort of smart footballer. He makes the right decisions.
Hang on, which bit don't you agree with? Didn't Gary say he was a good fit? And I said, do you?
Oh, no, but he said he's not sure.
I'm saying that he's. I feel he's slightly overrated, which I think you disagree with.
Well,
Sorry,
yeah, I see what you're. Okay, he may not be a Phil Foden or a Jack Grealish.
Yeah.
But I do think that he might have had more time in the England squad, for example, had he been at a club higher up.
Well, there was also a few personal issues with Southgate.
There were a few personal issues with Southgate. I think for us, I think he is exactly the kind of player that we need to try and move us up to whatever that next level is that we are going. I'm almost surprised that there aren't clubs who finished higher up than us. Really.
There was talk of Newcastle.
There was talk of Newcastle.
There's also talk his wife or girlfriend doesn't want to leave London, and London's a big draw for players.
Or move to London. She's in London.
Oh, actually, I don't know, but London's a big draw.
Right, London is a big draw.
That's what I was saying.
Hey, it's nice here.
No, I think, look, there is no doubt he's a talented player. He's the type of player we like at Tottenham. We enjoy watching players that are gifted in this way. My biggest concern about him is my impression is he flits in and out of games. Whereas in this Postecoglou formation, he's going to need to be central and focal and absolutely the focal point of the team, really, because that number 8, everything is going to go through a great deal. So he can't flit in and out. He's got to be on it for 90 minutes, and that's kind of what I was alluding to about stepping up to the bigger pond. Is I think at Leicester sometimes he, from what I could see, he could almost allow himself to coast through sometimes. And I think what I would hope to see, and he's got it in his locker, is him stepping up and really becoming the main man of the Tottenham team, which is a bit different, I think, to being the main man.
I feel for him as well, because he takes a great free kick and he can't do that at Tottenham, so they have to knock that stuff
well,
out.
you can if Kane goes.
Yeah, but you don't take good free kicks at Spurs. It just doesn't happen. So moving on from the sort of the transfer ins and outs, some staff ins and outs. Greta Steinsson potentially leaving the club. Paratici apparently still lurking in the back. How do we feel about that?
I've got no issue with Paratici being there.
So that was on the back. Sorry, Alistair Gold sort of said that there's word that Paratici is still on a sort of consultancy basis with the club. Levy obviously really likes him.
It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I think Paratici's transfer record since coming to Tottenham is fairly positive. There has been some debate around that, but I think that he's generally tried to reshape the squad with a younger type of profile and generally players who are more technical and better on the ball. I think the signing of Vicario has Paratici all over it.
Not Jake, actually Paratici.
Not Jake Paratici.
You got me.
And we talk about Vicario a bit more.
Yeah.
But I think, Paratici is a guy with good contacts in the game. And the more help and the more advice anybody can get at any point in life has to be a good thing. So I don't see the issue. Steinsson's a bit of a shock. We had John in the studio last week telling us how well liked he was at the club, and how highly thought of.
Yeah.
So there is a sort of duality between keeping Paratici on in this advisory capacity, whilst absolutely sacking off the sort of structure that he built under him. But at the end of the day, it's up to Ange and what Ange wants, and Scott Munn as well.
Yeah. Jake, shake-up has already started at the club. they've announced the coaching staff. Obviously, Postecoglou with Chris Davies, Mile Jedinak, Australian, who I believe played for Palace.
Did, yeah.
Rob Birch, Ryan Mason's going to stay on, which we all think is probably a good thing. And the guy Ryan Mason had to his left at the end of the season, Matt Wells. So it's starting.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have to say, whoever he wants, let him have him.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't bring in a new manager who's clearly a philosophy-driven manager if you're then not going to just let him do what he wants, bring in who he wants, because otherwise you're not allowing him to do the best he can.
There was talk that people were getting in a rage, as they do on Twitter. Oh, he's not going to be able to get all the guys over from Celtic. But actually, everywhere Postecoglou's gone, and probably because he's gone to different countries every time, he's not been able to drag people with him. You know, some coaches take the same people with them the whole time. Postecoglou hasn't done that, and it's a good thing. It clearly shows that he can work with who. He just puts his methods forward, and they get on board with it. So we need that.
Absolutely. If Ange wants it, give it to him.
Okay, and another one coming in, not confirmed, is the goalkeeper Vicario from Empoli. I'm not doing his first name at any stage. I'll maybe try later. We're going to talk to Patrick Kendrick, an expert, a Serie A expert, on that very shortly. We need a new goalkeeper. It's clear Hugo's going to go. I've not seen much of him. Someone did a YouTube video of the guy letting in all the goals he let in. I mean, goalkeeping letting in goals, shock. The most incredible video I'd ever seen. But I've done a little bit of research. He seems a good keeper. I think I'd have preferred Raya for his Premier League experience. Ticks a lot of boxes. We've talked about this a number of times. Him being homegrown. It seems the price might be too high for Raya. They're getting this guy from Empoli. Let's hope he's good, right?
There's been talk about how this has come about, and
well, you just said it. It's got Paratici's paws all over.
Well, of course it does. But I think as well there's been some debate. You know, David Raya was the number one, and we couldn't go to that price, and this, that, the other. These sorts of deals don't get done overnight. Okay, Vicario came out of nowhere after it seemed to go south with David Raya, but it clearly hasn't come out of nowhere. And in fact, the rumour is that it goes back as far as January and so on. And clearly, Paratici knows the quality of the player very well. The other factor to it is the data-driven approach that has been spoken about. Yeah. Now, the metrics that we're all seeing show that Vicario is actually ahead of Raya on a lot of these metrics. He's supposed to be rated as one of the top 3 goalkeepers in Italy. I don't think you could say that of David Raya in the UK. But rather than sort of data and all of that, I only really take a look at a keeper in terms of how many points can I say you have won or lost the team this season. That's kind of a subjective one to answer. I get that. Pretty easy for me with Hugo Lloris in the last 3 or 4 seasons. I would say easily somewhere between 6 and 9 points he has cost us every season. Prior to that was picking up 6 to 9 points most seasons with him. Yeah. And that to me is what a goalkeeper is about, right? So until we see him, we don't know. But I am excited by what I've heard and read about him, and actually outside of the homegrown issue with David Raya and the fact that I put my balls on the line last week and said that he will come to Tottenham, I'm not too upset. I'm not too upset that we've missed out.
Any talk about him when you went to Italy? Was it all over the papers and in the cafes?
Everywhere. It's all people were talking about. The vineyards. Goodness, he's big in the vineyard game. I have to say, I was disappointed when it looked like the Raya sort of move was going to break down, if it ever got that far. We don't know how far it got. People suggested it was a money thing. The price was too high. It's disappointing as a Tottenham fan because you don't want to, and you can see the narrative. Oh, Levy he's going for him because he's cheaper, he's saving money, all this kind of thing. The one thing I will say is that David Raya has been really good at Brentford. Brentford buy good players. Thomas Frank's a good manager. He won't play him. So you've got that. But what you have to remember is, in this day and age, clubs are watching players from all over the world, from clubs that you've never heard of, players that you've never heard of. We saw it with Roberto De Zerbi. He was basically plucked out of nowhere, and look at him as a sort of from a managerial.
But the players they've bought as well,
and the players they've bought exactly the same at Brighton. So actually, I think a lot. I know in the past, I'm talking the last 20 years, we've had players turn up at Tottenham who we've never heard of. Let's not list them now. But, and they've turned out to be disasters. But I just feel that this day and age, I think it happens a lot less because I think there's a lot less surprises. Because
there's no secrets anymore.
There's no secrets anymore. And if we're hearing that this is who the goalkeeper Tottenham are going to sign, there must be, I'm naive. I think there's a very good reason for it. You've just said it. He's rated as one of the best goalkeepers in Italy. I think you have to get on board with it. If they've decided that he's going to be a good, I mean, goalkeeper's important. They're not just going to be signing, a random player. He's not that young either. He's not old, but he's not that young, which I also think is important.
People are just like, sorry, Gary. People go, it's the next Galini, which is just nonsense. Because he's Italian. But also we've done it early, which is very important.
Yeah, he's in for the first day of training and all of that. But there's two other very, very quick points about this, and one is that we need a squad rebuild, so we have to, in certain areas, be prepared to take the cheaper player or the cheaper option if the data stacks up and so on and so forth. A cheaper player doesn't necessarily mean a lesser player, and people need to get their heads around that. Yeah. And in actual fact, there's every chance that he could become as good, if not better than David Raya. Time will tell, and if we've got him for 23 million less, then that's a very good thing. The second point that I wanted to make about that is I think it is a good message from Tottenham to the market to say, okay, if you're going to price us out, it's not an issue. We have reserves. And that's where Paratici taught Tottenham a lot, is to have different plates spinning, identify the players, and get one of them in.
Yeah.
I've thought about this. You look at maybe 5 years ago, it was Leicester. Now it's Brighton. Plucking these players that you've never heard of. And I always thought, why can't we do that at Tottenham? So I think you have to give it a chance before you can say it doesn't work.
100%.
Okay, well, as ever, I've heard your excellent thoughts, but I wanted to get an actual expert on. So we're going to talk to Serie A commentator for 10 years now, Patrick Kendrick. Patrick, thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming on. You're a Serie A commentator, have been for many years, so you would have seen a lot more of Guglielmo Vicario than we would have. Just give us an insight, if you will, into what we can expect. A deal supposed to be closed today.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. He's a brilliant shot stopper. I think that's the side of Vicario's game that stands out the most. It's his ability to make saves that he really has no business making. I recall a triple save he made for Empoli last season against Roma at the Olimpico. Where I was on commentary, made me look a little bit silly because you almost start to, praise the first save and then the second one comes along and then the third one, so you end up sort of sounding like a bit of a fool. But in the end, on the replay, I was able to hopefully do it justice. No, he commands his box very well. He's one of those tall, very lean goalkeepers, but very agile despite his height. And it's been a bit of a meteoric rise, to be honest, in the sense that he came through with the Udinese Academy, but he had to wait a while. I mean, he's born in 1996. Sorry, that's a feature of being over here in Italy. We tend to always remember players' age via their sort of year of birth. So in terms of, you'd expected him to have done a bit more, given that he's now 96, or what's that, he'll be turning 27 this year if he's not already turned it. But he had a very quick ascension in the sense that he was backup goalkeeper to Alessio Cragno at Cagliari, and he just got a couple of opportunities in the COVID season. Cragno got COVID. I think he played 3 times. His debut was away at Inter in San Siro, and he was absolutely brilliant that night. And then from there, he got his move to Empoli, and he's just gone really from strength to strength. And he comes from the northeast of the country originally, Udine, which is a bit of a hotbed for goalkeepers. It's traditionally where Dino Zoff came from. Alex Meret, who's just won the league with Napoli, he's from there. Ivan Provedel, who's with Lazio. They're all in the Italy setup now. So he's had to wait his turn. But for my money, I think he's Italy's best goalkeeper at the moment. Wow. Better shot stopper than Donnarumma. I think Donnarumma's dropped off a little bit. Whether he can reach the heights of what we saw from Donnarumma at Euro 2020 remains to be seen. But I think he's certainly got what it takes to be a top goalkeeper. The interesting thing will be now to see whether he can make that step up from playing for a team like Empoli, who are mid to lower table side in Serie A, to playing for
mid-table Tottenham.
Side, for Spurs. Well, I didn't want to say, but in theory, a top 6 side in the Premier League.
One thing I noticed, someone did a video. You see so many videos on YouTube, but someone did a video of all his touches in an Inter game. I don't know whether it was this season or last season. Made some good saves. One thing I noticed, and this bothered me a little bit, he seemed a little bit poor on the ball. Empoli spent a lot of the time passing the ball back to him. Inter were closing him down. Gave the ball away a couple of times. Spooned it into touch. We had a lot of that with Lloris. How is he on the ball?
Yeah, I think that's the weakest area of his game, to be honest. I mean, again, I think it depends all on your vision, your philosophy. What do you want from a goalkeeper in this day and age? It seems to be more and more people want them to be first and foremost very good with their feet, and then if they can make some saves on top of that, then that's a bonus. Personally, I'd always prefer a goalkeeper to make saves and win matches for you by keeping the ball out, and he's very, very good at that. As I said, there are some saves which, I'm not a big proponent of expected goals, but I'm sure for those that are, I'm sure there's so many. I think at one stage last season he was streets ahead of any other goalkeeper in Serie A in terms of the amount of expected goals against that he'd improved for Empoli simply because of his ability to keep the ball out of the net. But again, there are question marks about his ability to build out from the back, because perhaps his age, perhaps it's a newer feature that's coming into the game, especially into the Italian game as well, where first and foremost, they try to develop goalkeepers. So I think if there are teams that are going to press high, he could be exposed in that area. So it's up to him to try and improve on that score, or decide, perhaps it's worth occasionally conceding possession as opposed to conceding a goal. But I think that's probably the area where he doesn't quite stand up to some of his competitors. If you were to bring in a modern goalkeeper, I think he's a stopper first, and with his feet, whilst he's getting better, he still has some way to go.
Patrick, away from Vicario, I'd like to talk about two players that Spurs would like probably to shift off of their books, who played in Serie A last season with varying degrees of success. Ironically, I feel as though Ndombele played for the league winners but didn't cover himself in glory, whereas Winks, when he came back from injury, played for Sampdoria and did cover himself in glory but went down. Is there any interest from Italian clubs in those two players, and how did they do in your view last season?
I'll start with Ndombele. You're absolutely right on that, in the sense that yes, he'll go away with a winner's medal, but it became evident fairly early on, probably by the turn of the year, if not the early part of the spring, that Napoli had no intention of taking up the option on him, which I think they were reporting here was about 30 million euros, which is quite a lot. And you can understand Spurs wanting to make as much back as possible. I think he's one of your most expensive ever signings, if not the record signing, isn't he? I think so.
Don't rub it in.
I remember him scoring against Torino, but that was the fourth goal in a 4-0 win away. That was just before the March international break. I think he might have scored in one of the wins against Rangers. So on paper, that was probably Napoli's easiest fixture in the Champions League group stage. But he was there as a backup to Zambo Anguissa, who played for Fulham. And I think Napoli were hoping to do a similar deal to one they'd done with him, where they had him on loan for a season first. He impressed. I think they then paid about 30 million euros to bring him in, and he's just gone from strength to strength. But I don't think Ndombele ever really got the playing time to show what he could do. Whether that's because Spalletti wanted to just pick his strongest 11 week in, week out, which he did, or that Anguissa was just so good that he wasn't giving Ndombele an opportunity, I'm not sure. I think it's probably somewhere in between. So I think it's a combination of Ndombele didn't do enough on the training ground to probably warrant more of an inclusion, and when he did come on, he didn't impress that much. And the guy ahead of him in the team was just, they had the best midfield three in Italy, really. They had Lobotka, Zielinski and Anguissa, and that was really sort of the spine of the team. So on that basis, I think he probably didn't get enough opportunities to shine. But again, is that down to him or is that down to the coach? Probably somewhere in between. As for Winks, you're right. He started the season with an ankle injury. Probably did well to actually be fit again by the new year, in the sense that although it then became clear that Samp were going down, at the start of the season they had Marco Giampaolo. He got sacked pretty quickly. They brought in Stankovic. And so there's always that difficult transition. But the problem with Sampdoria is they sold all of their players. They had huge financial issues all season. The club looked like it was going to go bankrupt. It looked like they were going to be demoted as well as relegated. And so because they sold so many of their good players, you start to wonder whether Winks got in as a regular fixture in the side because of a dearth of options elsewhere. He did play well, and he played the bulk of the minutes from 2023 onwards, but it's very difficult to stand out in a team like that, especially when you're essentially a central midfielder, just keeping things ticking over, which is what he seemed to be from what we saw of him here. And again, how can you stand out in a team that barely won a handful of matches and were rock bottom and were doomed? So credit to him for at least getting some game time, but I don't think on the strength of those performances that any Serie A club will be necessarily moving to bring him in. So that's probably not the news you wanted to hear.
Nope.
Nope. Hi, Patrick. Actually, the sort of going the other way, Kulisowski is one that it's kind of been a bit back and forth. It looked like he might be going back, and now it looks like he's probably going to stay at Tottenham. How's he still sort of viewed at Juve? Obviously, he left a couple of seasons ago. Didn't have a great season at Tottenham, just gone. To be fair, I don't think a couple of players covered themselves in much glory, so maybe a bit of a tricky one to call. But how's he still sort of viewed over there?
I think he's still highly rated over here because he was quite precocious, when he burst onto the scene. He was at Atalanta, they loaned him to Parma. He was brilliant that season, one of the best players we've seen in terms of young players recently. And he's still young. I think we must be 23 now. So he's got plenty of upside ahead of him. I think the first 6 months he had with Spurs looked like a brilliant signing, and then the news did filter back last season that he hadn't been able to back that up with his performances, whether it's because he got found out in inverted commas or whether he simply benefits from playing in a team that's performing and he's a confidence player. I think Juventus were keen to move him on, and at one stage they were wary of not being able to get the transfer fee from him, and Spurs might not necessarily have followed through with that because Juventus have quite well publicised financial difficulties. So I don't think they necessarily wanted to try and bring him back in and incorporate him back into the side. Certainly not as long as Allegri's there. He doesn't seem sold on the player. So, whether someone would then move to buy him if he weren't to stay at Spurs and make the deal permanent, then I'm not so sure, because Juventus would be loath to sell to a rival, I think, and it's only really the rivals that have the sort of money that they would be willing to accept for a transfer fee. So I think it's either he stays at Spurs and Juventus are happy to get that permanent transfer fee through the door, or he reluctantly goes back to Turin as part of this massive rebuild that they've got on at the moment.
I think it's been confirmed that he will stay at Spurs. I'm quite happy he's going to stay at Spurs, but he did have a poor season. One who didn't, just finally, is Bentankur. I'm stunned that Juve sold him. Juve probably don't sell good players, but he does seem like a player that I don't think Juve should have got rid of.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of his. He's one of those players that until you watch him week in, week out, perhaps you're not really necessarily appreciative of everything he does. But I mean, he's just very good at breaking up play. He tries to play those positive passes. He's got a great engine. I think Juventus lost a lot when they got rid of him, to be honest, because they don't necessarily have that sort of player that's very good at breaking up play and then quickly starting attacks the other way. They've got a lot of players that are neither one nor the other. Manuel Locatelli, is he a deep line playmaker? Is he more comfortable in a midfield three? Is he a pure holding midfield player? They've got a lot of players like that who didn't necessarily do a lot. They had Artur, who went to Liverpool and didn't offer a great deal. Rabiot had a great season going the other way, but even prior to that, he didn't score a single goal the previous season. So I think Bentankur certainly offered them a lot in terms of stability that they weren't necessarily able to replicate this season. I think that was the real problem area for Juventus this season was the midfield, and I think possibly in hindsight, were they right to let him go? No, because they basically sold two players in Bentankur and Kulisowski to try and finance the Vlahovic deal.
Yeah.
And now he had a terrible first full season, didn't score anywhere near as many goals as they'd expected, and now it looks like they might be willing to cash in on him and possibly Chiesa. So Juventus' transfer dealings have not worked out, and I think Paratici's reputation, if it wasn't already heavily tarnished, is probably at the lowest possible level it could be.
Yeah, Patrick, brilliant. Thanks for coming on. We'll let you go and enjoy the Milan sun. Won't keep you any longer. Great to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Patrick. Thank
Cheers.
you.
Cheers, gents. All the best. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Interesting from Patrick. Bit worrying that he can't play with his feet. The goalkeeper, not Patrick. That is. I've not played five-a-side with Patrick, but he looks like a good shot stopper. I would kind of hope we'd get someone who could ping that 40-yard pass to whoever the wing back is or the full back. That concerns me a little bit. I don't know about you.
The only thing I would say about that, in the Premier League, how many of those goalkeepers are there? Obviously, you've got Edison, you've got Alisson.
You've got him up the road at Ramsdale. He's brilliant at that, to be fair.
Yeah, he's quite good at that. But, that's probably that might be the best bit about his game. He's made the odd kind of mistake this season as well, but Jordan Pickford's pretty good at it. That's a pretty kind of niche skill for a goalkeeper to have. Hey,
It was so frustrating with Lloris, though. It
True.
really was.
true,
Faffing about in his own 6-yard box.
but Lloris wasn't even that good at kind of short play on the ball.
No.
So you'd assume that Vicario might be a bit of an upgrade on that. But I have to say, some of the stuff Patrick said about him, I'm all in for
You're
it.
all in.
Some of the stuff, I love that bit that he mentioned about he comes from where all the other good goalkeepers are coming. Oh, they make him well up there. Well, that's fine then.
Okay.
I think the key points are, look, we'll see how good he is with his feet. I've been reading lots and lots of things, including a Reddit post from an Empoli fan that was very well written that suggested he actually is good with his feet, with short passes. You know, Patrick's right. He's not the best with knocking it long, but Postecoglou's sides generally aren't as direct. They sort of do build through the lines, so perhaps that's not such an issue. The thing that really caught my attention from that interview, if I focus on the positives, which I like to try to do, is Patrick saying that for him, he was the best goalkeeper in Serie A last season, ahead of even Donnarumma. You're going to tell me I said that wrong.
It's better than your previous attempt when we were off air.
Donnarumma?
No, it's not that.
You said Donnarumma, yeah.
Who was it?
Yeah, Donnarumma, you got it right
I
first
got it.
time.
Donnarumma.
Stop confusing me. Okay, but yeah,
Easily confused.
he had him as the best goalkeeper in easily confused. He had him as the best goalkeeper in Serie A, above Donnarumma and Onana even last season. So you got to listen to these people that have seen them, and the potential's clearly there. It's a good signing.
And when you hear stuff like that, you go, okay, we didn't sign Raya, but we've just signed what a Serie A commentator said has been the best goalkeeper in the league last season. Well, who on earth? And if it costs 18 million less, who's complaining?
Okay, rest of the squad. We've talked over the last few weeks ins and outs and who we don't want to see and who we do want to see. But I'm more interested at the moment in how this squad quickly transitions. It's another voice. Some of these players have had the same voice for a number of years. Sorry, different. It's another voice. Sorry, a number of these players have had so many voices. Got another voice now. Like if you were at work and you had 5 different managers over 5 years, you'd be scrambled. And I'm just a little bit concerned. We've got to be patient. And Spurs fans at the moment are not patient. The back end of Conte was such a disaster. I really hope that if we don't hit the ground running, we lose a few games, that we're all patient. I think we have to be.
I feel like it's one of those where it's about the energy at the club at the same time. If the players look as though they're buying into it, if the energy from Postecoglou in press conferences is right, if he manages to get everybody on board, I don't think people are expecting miracles overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. We just want to be pulling in the same direction. I want to go to a White Hart Lane, Tottenham Stadium, where we're looking forward to going because we know what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to do. Too often over the last 3-4 years, I've been sat there like, how are we actually trying to win this game? What are we actually trying to do here?
But I'm going to sorry, I'm all over the place. I'm going to liken it to something that's going on at the moment. The Ashes. We lost the first test. Everyone's going, oh, it was great. It was so exciting. Isn't Bazball brilliant? In my head, we lost. So if we're going out and playing attacking football, we're losing 3-2. We have talked about this before. There's got to be a balance between, I'm really excited, but results have got to come. And I reiterate, we have to be patient with this. This is the great reset.
I think goals are a big part of it, or the way you score goals. Remember under Harry Redknapp, we weren't very good defensively at times, but we were very good going forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what fans go back to. Under Pochettino, we were very, very good defensively, and he did that first, and then the attacking side of things came. And we started playing some really good football.
But we're so bored of the defensive side. He does need to come in and shore up the defence. But I think everyone's thinking we're going to get to the first home game of the season and see this as attacking football.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So under Harry Redknapp, things were very good, and I'm saying Poch sort of took that on. But I think that fans, I'm kind of with you. If we lose loads of games 4-3, I'm not going to be that happy about that. But I hope that the majority of Tottenham fans will be because of all the ones that have said how they want to see more exciting football. They've all said they want excitement over winning, perhaps, or they'd rather have an exciting game that we may lose 4-3 than a game that we win 1-0. This is what we've heard though a lot over the last couple of seasons. Yeah. I'm not sure it's something that I've ever really been fully on board with because I'd like us to finish in the Champions League places. I'd like it to be playing in the Champions League the season after this one coming. And if it means we won a lot of games boringly, I'm personally never been that bothered. But I don't think Postecoglou is going to bring us that anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I think that you're right though about giving him time. Imagine if you had 5 managers in your job or in your job or in anyone's job. Your head would be absolutely spun, wouldn't it? After 5 years or so, because you wouldn't know whether you were coming or you were going. So I think they're going to have to give him time. And that's the other thing when we sign players. Fans want results instantly. When you move jobs, how long are you given before you're going to be turfed out?
Yeah.
Because you haven't hit
Settled
your targets
in.
or settled in. You know, you might be given a year or two. And that's without 80,000, 70,000 people watching you every week.
It's not how football works.
Correct.
We're going to have to do that.
But we have
There's
to do
no
that.
point, this great reset, after the 3 managers we've just had since Pochettino, of just not giving this guy time. You have to give this guy time.
Yeah, I think he'll get it. I think, the 4-year contract, and I think there is a realisation that the club needs to get back to a DNA and a way of playing. And whether it is Ange Postecoglou who brings us that ultimate success in playing in that way, it's certainly going to be him that's going to lay the foundations. And regardless what the fans think and regardless of how it's going, I think Postecoglou will drag us kicking and screaming towards playing a style of football that we need and want to play, that will then be the foundation of what we do over the next, hopefully, 10 or 15 years. So he'll get the time, I'm sure of it. Certainly from the board. And I think the fans just need to be on board with that.
How do we turf out the list as long as your arm of players that we need to get rid of? We've never been good at getting rid of 4 or 5 players in a window.
Well, and Ndombele, Winks, Lo Celso, all of these players. Hopefully, Winks is linked to Leicester today.
Yeah.
So hopefully he will go. There's been talk about Ndombele being a good fit for Postecoglou. I don't see it. I don't trust the guy. I don't think he'd work hard enough. We're talking about James Maddison as fitting in and out of games, but at least Madison, will work and you can get into his head. I just don't see it with Ndombele. I wouldn't have him close to my team. Lo Celso is an interesting one, but I don't see him as an 8, and I don't really see him as a 6. But I do see him as a good footballer, but just not fitting with us. And then, of course, that dearth of defenders, so-called, that we have: Sanchez, Dyer, Rodon. God,
it's a long list. As I said, it's a long list, and it's a problem because we don't. A lot of these players may have, if we'd got into Europe, they could have had possibilities. There's nothing for them.
No,
there isn't.
No,
the squad's too big for the number of games we're going to have.
That's the problem. That's part of the problem without being. That at least if you're in the Europa League, or even I've forgotten what it's called now, the Conference League. That even more so in the Conference League, you can really give the guy the score, because in the Champions League it's difficult because you still need to play your best side. You're in the Conference League, then all these guys who might be coming back from loan that we might keep, or some of these defenders would all be getting a gig. It's only 38 Premier League games, a couple of cup games, and that's it.
Yeah, it's a really bloated squad. And there was a video going around on Twitter this week. I don't know if you saw it, from Jon Mackenzie from Tifo Football, analysing. Great video, analysing the squad, and we are now going to talk to Jon about that. Jon, thanks so much for joining us. I've watched your excellent piece on Tifo Football about this squad, which is not really fit for purpose, and I totally agree with that. We've got wing-backs who have never played full-back before. We don't have a passer in midfield, and you talk about position football. We haven't played that for many years since Pochettino. How do you think Postecoglou goes about fixing this squad, and how quickly can he do it?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, I think, when it comes to Spurs. And the way that I couched it in the video was all about how you move from a squad that has been built around a back 3 system to how you start playing a back 4 system out of that squad. And I think a lot of people like to sort of solve problems by simply moving players around the field. So you can say something like, well, Ange Postecoglou likes to get width from wingers, so let's just play the players in the Spurs squad who have roughly played out in wide areas. So you can move Son out wide. You say, well, we've got Kulisowski here. We can push a few of our wing backs into more attacking positions. And lo and behold, you say, oh, well, we've solved all of those problems. But I think that sort of solution just doesn't really take into account the sorts of roles and responsibilities that someone like Ange Postecoglou will want from his players. And so all you end up doing is just moving problems around. Rather than fixing problems, you simply push them into other areas and you make them problems for future transfer windows. So the way that I went about trying to fix a squad was by saying, well, let's try and work out those areas where we can make concrete changes which will benefit Spurs in the long run. We're not going to be able to fix all of those problems immediately, but we can at least make a start, and then you have at least a grounding when you're going into future transfer windows to be able to start fixing those problems.
But how is it when you've got an Udogie and Porro who are wing backs? I did a little bit of research on Udogie and I was hoping to see that he'd played left back before. He hasn't. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, and that is the very problem, right? If you're playing a back three system, usually you will end up getting width through your wing backs, and so what ends up happening, and this has happened to a lot of Antonio Conte's former clubs, is that you bring in a load of wing backs, and then suddenly, if you want to move back to that back four system, you now have a load of players who don't really fit either of the areas in a back four system where you're going to try and get width. So fullback areas and winger areas as well. And I think on top of that, the fact that Ange Postecoglou likes pretty classic wingers, like touchline hugging wingers who can get squared up against fullbacks and go 1v1 against them, go either way around them. It starts making these problems even more exacerbated. So yeah, the issue is that you now have brought in, like for example, Pedro Porro, who you mentioned. You spend a lot of money on a player who now doesn't really have any role in this system. Udogie, really exciting player, but how do you fit him in? You're only ever going to be able to play him out of position in a back four system, I think. So, yeah, this is the big problem that Spurs are facing.
And they say that Conte leaves squads in bad positions, and clearly he's done that again.
Yeah.
One thing, John, that you've touched on already and you raised in your video is the issue of Kulisowski, and I'm just wondering where you see Kulisowski in terms of what you think his best position is, because for me, I think he is a high and wide winger. I think his best performances for Spurs have come when he has been one-on-one with fullbacks and he's trampled all over them, got in behind them and delivered and put in great delivery into the box. But you seem to disagree with that. Where do you see Kulisowski then?
So I think there's been a lot of pushback, I think, from Spurs fans with respect to my position on Kulisewski.
Okay.
Precisely because, as you say, he played in a wide position under Conte and had a really great, particularly first half of the season off the back of it. But I think a lot of my disagreements with that approach have come from the fact that I see the way that Kulisewski was used for Conte was very much in a transitional sense, right? So Spurs very much under Conte about building up deep, creating space to then attack. And I think in those sorts of situations, Kulisewski's like an excellent ball carrier. He could cause opposition fullbacks problems if he's got them already running back towards their own goal. He causes so many problems in those sorts of situations. Whereas I think that given that Ange Postecoglou, yes, there will be transitional attacks, but I also feel as though the wide players more often than not will be receiving the ball 2 feet, sometimes from a standing start. There will be transitional moments as well. But there are going to be situations where you have to be able to go around a fullback when you've got them stood up, and that's where I start thinking that Kulisewski is maybe not as usefully positioned. And actually, I think the role where you actually get a lot more transitional potential is in the number 8 spot. So as I see it, Postecoglou's teams, they are build-up teams. They want to slowly move the ball down the field. Well, I say slowly. They want to move the ball down the field through the thirds, but they want to do it in wide areas, and then they have like a single pivot in the deeper areas to help facilitate that, and then they have the 2 8s on either side to be able to facilitate that further down the field. And what will often end up happening is those 8s get the ball in a number of an amount of space in the half space area that they can then run into, and I think that Kulisewski would suit that quite nicely. And I also think that actually in the system that Conte was playing, even in the 3-4-3, when Kulisewski is nominally an outside right player, he's often expected to drop into those spaces anyway. So a lot of the progression that he's doing is out of that more central area anyway. But it's worth saying as well, I mean, I do think that Kulisewski would be the best option Spurs have as a wide, as a winger in a Postecoglou system. But I think that's an indictment then of the other positions of the other players that they have in those positions as well. So my solution of moving Kulisewski inside was more to solve the problem of the 8 issue, and then say it's very clear that you have a deficiency in the wide areas. So now you just go out and recruit those wide areas with the understanding that, if you wanted to, you could play Kulisewski on the wide right. And I'm sure Postecoglou probably will.
Hi, John. I know you said you don't like to do sort of transfer conjecture or rumours, so I'll do that part for you. It looks like that James Maddison could be getting close potentially to coming to Tottenham. Would he be the kind of archetypal 8 that you've been talking about to fit into that system?
Yeah, and I think he's played the same sort of role for Leicester in the past. When Brendan Rodgers was playing a 3-4-3, you would see Maddison playing that wide right position and dropping inside in the same way that we said Kulisowski did under Conte at times. And I think that's exactly the sort of player that you're looking for, a player who is going to be good in tight spaces because, as I said in the video, you end up with those wide triangles of players where there's a lot of rotation, a lot of interchange, and the idea is that you're able to possess the ball but also generate these dangerous attacking moments as well. So someone like Maddison, with the technical ability and creativity he has, will be perfect for that. So yeah, it makes a degree of sense that they're going for Maddison, and that suggests that they are going to use Kulisewski out wide and have Maddison as the inside option. But as I said in the video, that in many respects, the fullback, the wide player, and the 8 on either side, they're all expected to do the same sorts of roles, with each role having a specific sort of superpower, if you want. But yeah, that it shouldn't be too surprising. I don't think that there are overlaps between the way that Kulisewski plays and the way that Maddison plays, and I guess in time, if any fullbacks are brought in, we'll see similarities with them as well.
But obviously, what also might be surprising to some Tottenham fans, which you did touch on in the video, is it could open up a very almost perfect gap for Tanguy Ndombele to come almost straight back in and fit into that perfect way of playing that Postecoglou likes to employ.
Yeah, I think both Ndombele and actually Lo Celso, who I haven't mentioned, I think would be perfect for those sorts of roles. But and I think when you make these kind of videos where you go through a squad and you say, how do you fit all of these players in? These players nominally are contracted to this club. We could use them to solve those problems, but obviously the context is important, and I'm not convinced that Lo Celso or even Ndombele will be heading back to Spurs anytime soon, off the basis of the histories that they've had at the club as well. So there's definitely potential there if they wanted to. The big question is whether or not they're willing to go back and attempt to salvage their Spurs careers.
Just finally, John, for some of these players, including Pochettino, it's a fifth voice in as many years almost. How quickly do you expect us to be able to see Postecoglou's the transition from what we've had under Conte, Mourinho, Nuno, all pretty similar, into Ange-ball, as I'm going to call it?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because he comes into Celtic and has not the ideal squad, but at least a workable squad for him to set up with, and it does take them a few months to really get going. I think any manager who's going to come in and have these sorts of structured positional ideas, there is always going to be a slow burn up towards the levels of perfection that you would want to see. But I think with the added downside of the fact that this squad is tricky to sort of read into an Ange-ball system, again, it could take a little bit longer, and I think that what we'll start seeing in the next few months as pre-season comes through, we'll start seeing the positions where Ange is going to try and experiment with players in certain positions, and no doubt there will be there'll be offshoots going into the transfer market when he decides that certain players or certain positions aren't very well catered for. So yeah, it will be really, really interesting to see. It will be fun. This is what I'm saying.
Good,
to all
we've
of
not had
my
fun for a
Spurs
long
friends.
time.
Yeah, exactly. You guys definitely deserve a bit of fun. Whether or not the excitement is offset by sensible results, I don't know. But it will. I think it will take you back to the Pochettino era. It will be that kind of football again. And I think the important thing is that when you have a coach who is wanting to produce attractive football, and also a coach who's just a genuinely authentic guy who I think thinks about what the fans want out of football, it will make some of those early squiffy results a little bit more palatable. It will be easier to deal with them than these managers who are a little bit more negative and who will throw the players under the bus from time to time, or will question the fans as well. So I definitely think it will be a roller coaster ride, and for a neutral like myself, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think we're looking forward to it as well. John, really, really great to get your insight, and the stuff on Twitter is great, and social media. Where can people find you, hear you, see you, listen to you?
Yeah, so most of my stuff is going out on Tifo Football, which you can find on YouTube if you search for Tifo, Tifo. And my personal Twitter is Jon_Mackenzie, and I tweet all sorts of nonsense over there.
We'll do the nonsense, you do the expert stuff. Jon, great to see you, great to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming on.
Cheers, John.
Cheers, John.
Thanks so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Worrying from Jon. Well, great from Jon, but also worrying because, like we've said on this pod already today and previously, this squad is just not fit for purpose.
Yeah, it's without doubt a rebuild, but I also don't think it is as drastic as it's being made out. Not necessarily by Jon, but just generally. I think Royale has shown that he can play as an inside fullback. He kind of did it as an inside wing back last season. I think Kulisowski can play high and wide and is devastating against fullbacks one-on-one. Jon's talking more about transitional sort of play.
But that's worrying for me because we've not had the ball for 5 years.
Yeah, but I for me, the performances when Kulisowski really stands out is actually when he is stood one-on-one with the fullback, takes them on, gets into those wide areas, and delivers. So Kulisowski for me isn't a concern. Son on the left is, because he does like to play inside and doesn't sort of get his feet white on the touchline as much. But I think the right-hand side of the pitch, I'm not as concerned about. With Bentankur and Madison, with Bissouma behind, to me that looks kind of dreamy.
The shame is we're not going to see Bentankur for a while. I know all these positive videos on Twitter. I'm back. I'm doing this. It's going to be November.
But in theory, I am concerned about the left-hand side of the pitch with Udogie and Son. I think that's going to take some time.
Well, but there's no reason why we can't sign a couple of players to try and plug that gap.
I'm almost thinking we can't keep buying.
No, but I'm sure there will be players that will be leaving. Listen, the transfer window only opens on is it the 1st of July or 30th of June? You can start signing players, something like that. So there's time for that to happen. Also, if you're getting rid of players, it doesn't matter if that kind of goes down to the wire as well. You want to get the players in early. Which it looks like they're going to be doing. And I have to say, in years gone by, so not with Paratici when he's been around, but in years before that, there were too many that we left it way too late, especially in August when the season's already started.
But I think Jon made a very good point as well in that interview when he said, we're going to see in pre-seasons how Postecoglou is going to go about plugging those gaps, and off the back of that, you can expect to see suddenly we need this, we need that, and we might have to anticipate a bit of a late flurry in the window based on what Postecoglou sees in pre-season in the first couple of games, and he goes, we're going to struggle unless we have this player who at the moment may not be on our radar by way of a profile or position. That I think Jon made a good point. We can expect to see.
I think that is true to an extent, but I also think I'm sure Postecoglou, if he hadn't done before before he went for the interview, he would have looked at how Tottenham play all the players, and he probably would have gone, I can do this with this person, this with this person. I probably can't do what I want with him and him and him, and I'm sure that's something that he's already looked at. So I wouldn't be worried. I think if you're happy with the fact that Postecoglou's now in charge, I think you have to then get on board with the fact that he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's a very experienced manager. Let's not forget. I'm sure he already has an idea of exactly what we need. And actually, what Jon was saying makes me quite excited with that sort of formation and the 6 and the 2-8s. And I have to say, some of the rumours that maybe Ndombele might be coming back, I don't know. I think
for me.
I think he could do a job.
This is a man that in a FA Cup game we were losing, I think, to Morecambe, walked off the pitch.
The only thing I'll say is, okay, fine. I take all of that. He was obviously very, very gifted as a sort of natural player. Maybe mentally he didn't quite have it. But the one thing I will say, if Ange decides, actually there's something, if Ange decides 100%. That he wants him, I think you have to get on board with it.
But let's look at the evidence, okay? Just very quickly on Ndombele. He is one of, I don't like to use the word hated, but I really can't stand the guy. And the reason is, he is one of the most supremely naturally gifted, talented players. He ought to be one of the best midfielders in the world. The reason he won't make it in a Postecoglou side is because it needs to function as a unit, and one link in that chain breaks, and the whole thing is going to fall apart. And you cannot trust him to put in the hard yards and press and close aggressively and have the fire in your belly. I wouldn't trust him in this team. I would love for him to be in this team because he is better than James Maddison. He is better than Bentankur as a natural footballer. But those two players will be far more effective always than Ndombele ever will be because the guy hasn't got it mentally.
Just going back to your point about a unit, Kane's going to be captain, right? Lloris is going to go, Kane's going to be captain.
Right, Bayern Munich.
Well, this is it. If Kane gets injured or he does go to Bayern Munich, there is Højbjerg. There's also talk of Højbjerg leaving. I do worry a little bit. There's not that many natural leaders in this team.
Characters and personalities. Yeah. It's a great point. And I have no natural answer for it because it has to be Kane. And if it's not Kane, I would never throw it.
It would be Højbjerg.
But he may go. And also, if it's Højbjerg, does that mean that he's de facto in the team? I don't want Højbjerg de facto in the team. You're absolutely right. That has to be.
Is that another reason not to sell Kane? You're not selling your captain.
Well,
for all the reasons. There are so many reasons, but you can't sell your captain.
Well, I think the position of Eric Dyer this season, I am watching with interest because there was talk at one point that he might leave, and then there was that talk of a new contract as well. Every manager that's come in has certainly started off with him, haven't they? We saw it and we were all surprised. Mourinho said this guy is going to be, the next best thing. Conte picked him a lot. He got back in the England squad, and then it all went down the pan. I'd be very interested to see what Ange Postecoglou thinks of him. Does he train well? Is he obviously a natural leader around the squad? Is he going to play him? We don't know the answers.
Jay, if you're suggesting that Eric Dyer's going to be our club captain and a starter next season, I mean, here's my season ticket back. I don't want it. But I do. Exactly, I would always go.
We've always said this though, and then the next managers come in and picked him a lot. So that's why I think it's an interesting situation.
I was feeling positive, Jake. You killed me.
Gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. Good chat. Our guests today were great, yourselves included. You're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you. Next week?
No, well, you're going to go on holiday or are you going to be here?
I'll be here.
You'll be here, okay. Good. Thank you for coming on, gents. One thing I want to do today is, just to end the show, I want to dedicate this show to a personal friend, Richard Haring, who tragically passed away at Glastonbury this week. Richard Haring was a Manchester United fan for his sins, but one thing, I must say as well, a personal close friend of Gary as well. He was a Man United fan, but one thing Richard did was fucking hate Arsenal, which was one of the reasons we liked him. So I do want to dedicate this show to the memory of Richard Haring, a close friend. Gentlemen, thanks again, and up the Spurs.